R. Kelly has been found guilty of sexually abusing and urinating on a 14-year-old girl in a infamous tape. For those of us from way back in the day that saw that tape, we knew that was R. Kelly. From way back in the day, we thought that would disappear. Well, it has come back to bite him in the ass, literally. Let's talk about this. So according to MSN.com, R. Kelly was found guilty of sexually abusing a teenage girl and abusing teenage girls Wednesday, marking the second time in a year that a jury has convicted the RnB singer of federal sex crimes. Now, after deliberating for more than 10 hours, that didn't take long, the jury in Chicago delivered their verdict, finding Kelly guilty of 3 counts of producing child sex abuse images and 3 counts of enticing underage girls to engage in criminal sexual activities. He was acquitted of 7 charges, including conspiring to obstruct justice and receiving and conspiring to receive child sexual abuse images. Mind you, he was acquitted of 7 charges, but the charges that he got found guilty on, that's enough to send him away for a long time. Jurors also acquitted R. Kelly's former business manager, Daryl McDavid. They acquitted him of conspiring to obstruct justice and receiving and conspiring to receive child sex abuse images. Milton Brown, a former assistant for R. Kelly, was found not guilty of conspiring to receive child sexual abuse images. Now, you got to understand, why did everybody around R. Kelly beat their charges, but he's the only one that got charged, even though it is proven, and they did testify that they were complicit. They were all a part of it. They would help him. They would bring girls to him. They would lure girls in for him. They went to court and they testified against him in an exchange for immunity. The jurors did their job. They looked at each count separately, and they obviously concluded, as I concluded long ago, that this case was overcharged. This is what R. Kelly's lawyer, Jennifer Bonjean, told the reporters at the courthouse. We're not celebrating a win entirely, but we're happy that the jury really did look at each count. The verdict comes on the heels of Kelly's conviction in New York last September, which marked the first time the R&B artist had been held accountable for sexual abuse claims that have dogged him for decades. In June, a judge sentenced him to 30 years in prison. That was back then, meaning that the 55-year-old could very well be behind bars for the rest of his life. Remember, we covered this and we said he faces similar charges in another court in another state, and if he is convicted then on any of those charges, he could be in prison for the rest of his life. If they give him 30 years again, that would be 60 years. 60 years that would have to be played out at the age of 55. That's 110 years before he gets out of prison. Or he will be 110 before he gets out of prison. R. Kelly ain't surviving all that. I don't know anybody that lives to be 110. But 3 of the 6 counts he was convicted of on Wednesday carry a minimum of 10 years in prison, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Y'all do the math. 3 of the 6 counts he was convicted of carries a minimum of 10 years. That's 30 years. And that's on 3. And we still have 3 more to go that he needs to be sentenced on. Prosecutors had tried to show how the RnB singer, who was acquitted of producing child sex abuse images in 2008, escaped accountability for so long. But they ultimately were unable to convince the jury of 12 that there was a systemic effort to hide Robert Kelly's abuse and rig the 2008 state trial, which also centered around one of the videos played for the federal jury. In a statement, U.S. Attorney John R. Lausch Jr. said prosecutors respected the jury's decision to find R. Kelly and his co-defendants not guilty on several counts, but they emphasized that he is still finally being held accountable for sexually abusing young girls. Now, while certain aspects of the charges and the trial made it difficult to obtain convictions for all of the charge, it is clear that justice had been served by the guilty verdict that was returned, said Lausch. Now, the Chicago federal trial has been seen as a reckoning on that infamous video that showed R. Kelly sexually assaulting and urinating on a young lady, and the trial that followed. Despite jurors in the previous case hearing from more than a dozen witnesses who positively identified the figure on the tape as the 14-year-old girl at the time, they said at the time they could not be sure it was her, and they acquitted R. Kelly of all of his charges back then, allowing him to continue preying on young girls and young women. Well, back then, her family took a payout. They got a large sum of money and they got a trip around the world. Okay? It wasn't really around the world per se, but it was a trip across to Europe and a bunch of other places. Basically, lay low, stay out of the country. We'll tell you when to come back into the country. And when they did come back, the little girl herself was coerced by her family into saying, "That's not me. That was not me on the tape." Now, with her saying that's not her, and 12 people saying we think it's her but we can't be sure, that's how he was acquitted. It's funny because he is now convicted of that same tape. This is to tell those out there who are doing this type of stuff that even if you can get away today, if they can prove years down the road that that was you, that's coming back to bite you in the ass. It wasn't until July 2019 that federal prosecutors got involved and indicted R. Kelly in both Chicago and New York. The indictments followed a 2017 investigation by Chicago journalist Jim DeRogatis, published by BuzzFeed News, and the 2019 docuseries, which we all know now, called Surviving R. Kelly, which further detailed women's allegations of Kelly's abuse. Over the course of about 4 weeks, jurors heard from more than a dozen witnesses, including the girl that was in that graphic video that became forever tied with Kelly's public persona. Her testimony was highly anticipated after her absence in the 2008 state trial and his decades-long denial that she was the person in the tape. She wasn't at trial. Investigators went to visit her family after they came back from wherever it was alleged that R. Kelly sent them away, and when they spoke to her, she was coerced into saying, "That's not me." She testified at this trial. At trial, she was now 37 years old. The 37-year-old woman testified under the pseudonym Jane because they didn't want to use her real name and they didn't want to show her identity, what she looks like now, to the public. She told the jurors that R. Kelly coaxed her into having sex with him hundreds of times when she was a teenager, but that she lied to law enforcement and a Cook County grand jury about the true nature of their relationship in order to protect the singer. That was something I would take to my grave, she said. During the trial, jurors watched several clips of 3 videos that witnesses said depicted R. Kelly sexually abusing that same woman as a teenager. The same girl that was seen in the video where he was peeing on her. That same girl appeared in multiple other videos. Ain't no way R. Kelly was going to get out of this. No way. Jurors also reviewed records of payments to Jane and her family that prosecutors said were meant to keep them quiet. They even traced the money and found the money and said that was hush money. So she and her mother also testified that R. Kelly had persuaded them to deny that she was the girl on the tape and that he was sexually abusing her. I did everything I could to keep that a secret, she said. It was embedded in me that this could never come out. Jurors also heard from 3 other women who testified that they were minors when R. Kelly lured them into having sex with him in the 90s and in the early 2000s. While questioning 2 of the women, the attorney attempted to show that they were actually 17 years old, which is the age of consent in Illinois, when their sexual relationships with the RnB singer began. But they insisted that they were in fact younger than that. Lisa Van Allen, a former girlfriend of R. Kelly, also testified in the 2008 trial, and 2 other witnesses told the jurors about the concerted and clandestine effort that the singer and his co-defendants took to retrieve tapes of him having a threesome with Van Allen and Jane being the 14-year-old at the time. Van Allen broke down in tears as she described how McDavid suggested that they should have killed her from the beginning after she failed the polygraph test about the tape. This was reported actually in the Chicago Tribune. That's crazy. It's crazy because here is R. Kelly's ex, one of his ex-girlfriends, and she is back to testify that R. Kelly talked her into having a threesome with him and the child at the time. The woman who's now 37 years old. Kelly and his team, they did their level best to cover up the fact that Robert R. Kelly and the RnB superstar is actually a sexual predator. Assistant U.S. Attorney Elizabeth Pozzolo said during closing arguments. They did their best, but in the end, they failed. Throughout the trial, attorneys for Kelly and his co-defendants described the witnesses as liars and extortionists. You know, they went with the story that R. Kelly was wealthy and they were trying to get a piece of the fame and a piece of the money, and raise issues with the authenticity of the videos. Those are made up. Those don't look real. In her closing argument, Bonjean compared the testimony of some witnesses to cockroaches. and government's case to soup, saying that if you find a cockroach in your soup, you throw out the whole soup. Basically, what they were going for is to have the whole case thrown out. There are just too many cockroaches with these witnesses, Bonjean said. I think Bonjean was stupid and should not have actually used that terminology, cockroaches. Anyhow, McDavid's and Brown's lawyers also tried to distance their clients from R. Kelly, claiming that back in the 2000s, they thought that the tape at the center of the state's case was a fake tape. McDavid, the only one of the three men who testified in his defense, told jurors he had been convinced that it wasn't that girl in the tape, and he wanted to believe R. Kelly so much when he denied sexually abusing that girl and other underage girls. Of all the three men that worked with R. Kelly, one testified in his defense, even though it was shaky. The other two straight up testified against him. For the last 3 weeks, I've learned a lot of things that I had no idea about in 2008, McDavid said. He said that he wanted to believe that the women who said that they were abused by R. Kelly were lying because he loved and he believed in the star, R. Kelly, so much. As I stand here today, I'm embarrassed. Wednesday's decision will help the government ensure Kelly's stay in prison. The RnB singer, who has continued to deny any wrongdoing, intends to appeal his convictions out of New York. Bonjean tweeted that he was in good spirits despite the split verdict, pointing out that his team won more counts than they lost. He is grateful for the support and the fight continues, she said. Shan Wu is a former federal prosecutor. Shan Wu said that the verdict showed how juries continue to be biased against victims. And it seems that while they believe that R. Kelly abused Jane, which is, again, the underage referred to as Jane, they discounted his alleged influencing the victim to remain silent previously for some 2 decades. My inference is that they essentially blamed the victims for that silence rather than blaming R. Kelly. This is what Wu told BuzzFeed News in an email. Nonetheless, the jury did the right thing, convicting R. Kelly of child pornography charges, adding to the previous federal conviction and sentence he recently received of 30 years. This does ensure some protection for our community in the future. It's safe to say R. Kelly will be going away probably for the rest of his life. Leave your comments in the comment section below. Tell me what you think about this one. I just think, man, I said it before, I'm going to say it again. Some of this was railroading, but some of it was guilty, and it was enough, the some that was guilty, to put him right where he's at. No excuses. Damn. Will you still be listening to his music? Will you still be singing his songs? Or will you be canceling R. Kelly altogether? I'll catch you on the next videos. I'm out. Peace. Jamaica, Jamaica. Sweet, sweet Jamaica. Nah left ya. Yeah, man, listen. My SouFLoTV audience, take a break real quick. I got this channel I have to tell you about. This channel is called Maurice Kingpin Channel on YouTube. Click the link in the description and go over to the channel. His channel focuses on highlighting beautiful places around Jamaica as he travels across the island, right? Beautiful Jamaica to be seen in a way you've probably never seen it before. None of us are really taking helicopter rides around the island to see it from a different angle. We land at the airport and we go about our business, right? And we view it from the ground. He's viewing it from the ground too. But also, even if you've taken many trips to Jamaica, I guarantee you that there are places that he's been that you have not been. So check out his videos. Enjoy the ride through beautiful, scenic Jamaica. from an angle that you've never done it before. Travel vicariously and enjoy these relaxing videos that he has up on his channel, showing Jamaica in a good light. It's not a killy channel. It's nothing to show in negativity. It is all something to relax you and to even jog some of you memories who haven't been back in a while. You can actually look through his videos and say, wow, this place has developed. Wow, when I was a child, this place used to look this way. Now it looks that way. That kind of thing, you know. Vicariously travel through his channel. I am inviting you to do so because I'm over there doing it and I want to share that with you.